Close your eyes for a moment, or simply let your gaze soften as we travel together to the high desert of the American Southwest. It is that quiet indigo hour in New Mexico, where the sun has dipped just below the jagged line of the horizon, leaving behind a sky painted in layers of dusty rose, pale violet, and deep, cooling orange. The air here is different than in the humid lowlands or the coastal forests. It is thin, crisp, and remarkably dry, carrying a clarity that makes the distant mountains feel as though you could reach out and touch their rugged peaks. As the heat of the day radiates back into the vastness of space, a gentle, restorative coolness settles over the high plateau. You might imagine the faint, earthy scent of sun-warmed sagebrush and the parched desert floor finally finding relief in the long, reaching shadows of the mesas. This is a land of immense, breathtaking scale.
New Mexico is a vast expanse of high-altitude plains, ancient volcanic fields, and timbered mountains stretching out over more than 121,000 square miles. It is the fifth largest state in the United States, a place where the horizon seems to go on forever, and the silence of the desert is a physical presence. Yet, within this massive territory, there is a surprising and profound scarcity. Despite its grand size and its varied geography, New Mexico has the least amount of surface water of any state in the Union. Only about 250 square miles of its entire surface is covered by water, less than 0.2% of its total area. When you stand on a high ridge looking out over the basin and range, the landscape can feel eternal and unchanging, a sea of terracotta earth, golden grasses, and silver-green shrubs. But in a place where water is so rare, every single drop becomes a precious, life-giving treasure. Life here has always been a delicate, intricate dance with the elements, a reliance on the unpredictable summer monsoons and the slow, steady melting of winter snowpacks from the high northern peaks. To thrive in this beautiful, arid world, both the flora and the people who call it home have had to learn the art of patience and the careful science of preservation. Because the water does not always flow when the crops are thirsty or the cities are dry, we have had to find ways to work with the rhythm of the seasons. We have learned to catch the rushing spring runoff, to hold it back with gravity and stone, and to save it like a gift for the leaner, hotter months. This fundamental necessity has shaped the very character of the land, leading to the creation of vast, still mirrors of deep blue, held captive within the rugged red rock canyons. These are the reservoirs, the quiet, man-made giants that sustain the desert. As we settle into the stillness of the evening, let us begin to explore the story of these waters, how they are gathered, how they are guarded, and the vital role they play in the quiet, steady heartbeat of the high desert. Let us take a moment now to truly arrive in this space of rest. As the desert cools outside your window, or perhaps just in your mind's eye, allow your body to sink deeper into the softness of your blankets. Feel the weight of your limbs becoming heavy, supported by the bed and the earth beneath you. There is no rush here. The desert has waited millions of years to become what it is today, and you too can afford these few minutes of absolute stillness. Adjust your pillow if you need to, or pull the covers a little closer. This is your time to disconnect from the busy world and reconnect with the quiet, steady truths of the natural world. If you find peace in these gentle explorations and the quiet stories of our planet, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. It is a simple, soft way to ensure that these moments of learning and rest are always waiting for you when you need them most. Perhaps you might even leave a quiet comment about what brings you comfort. Your presence here is a gift, and I am so grateful that we can share this journey into the stillness together. Now, let your focus rest gently on the rhythm of your breathing. Don't try to change it or force it. Simply observe it as it is. Imagine your breath as a slow-moving river, winding its way through a wide, sandy canyon. It flows in, cool and refreshing like a mountain spring, and it flows out, warm and steady, carrying away the lingering thoughts and tensions of your day. With every inhale, imagine you are drawing in the vast, clear energy of the high desert sky. With every exhale, you are releasing yourself into the night, letting go of the need to do or to be anything other than exactly where you are. In and out, slow and rhythmic, like the ancient, patient pulse of the land itself. This rhythm, this eternal ebb and flow, mirrors the long geologic history of the Southwest. Long before the first reservoirs were mapped or the first great dams were poured, the land was being sculpted by the patient, persistent hand of water. In this arid climate, water is the primary architect of the landscape. It is the force that carved the deep, winding arroyos that crisscross the plains, and the power that smoothed the rugged edges of the towering mesas over eons. It is a story of incredible persistence, where a single drop of rain, repeated over thousands of years, can wear down even the hardest volcanic stone. To truly understand the massive blue reservoirs we see today, we must first look at the ancient, winding path that water has always taken through this territory, following the invisible pull of gravity and the deep-seated memory of the riverbeds that have guided the lifeblood of the desert since time immemorial. It is a journey that begins high above the clouds, where the air is thin and the peaks are capped in white. Imagine those peaks now, the San Juan Mountains of southern Colorado, where the air is so cold and pure that the snow crunching beneath an imaginary footstep would sound like a soft, rhythmic whisper. It is here, in this high, silent cradle of rock and ice, that the story of the Rio Grande begins. This river is more than just a body of water. It is the state's most vital artery, a silver thread that stitches together the high alpine forests and the low, sun-drenched basins. As the spring sun begins to warm the granite faces of the mountains, the snow begins its slow, inevitable transformation. It turns from crystalline white to a clear, cold liquid, trickling down through crevices, joining other small seeps, and gathering strength until it becomes a rushing mountain stream. As you lie there, imagine following that water as it leaves the shadows of the evergreens and begins its long journey south. This river, the Rio Grande, is a titan of the American West. It stretches for roughly 1,900 miles, making it one of the longest river systems in North America. To visualize that distance, imagine a line of water that starts in the snowy heights of Colorado, carves its way through the entire vertical length of New Mexico, and then serves as the winding international boundary between Texas and Mexico before finally resting in the warm embrace of the Gulf of Mexico. It is a journey through 3 different states and 2 nations, a continuous flow that has persisted through countless human generations and geological epochs. In New Mexico, the river follows a path known as the Rio Grande Rift. This is a place where the Earth's crust is slowly being pulled apart, creating a deep valley flanked by towering mountains. As the river meanders through this rift, it creates a narrow ribbon of green in an otherwise tawny landscape. For centuries, the people of the high desert have looked to this silver thread as their primary source of life. However, the Rio Grande is a river of moods. In the late spring, fueled by the melting snowpack you visualized earlier, it can be a wide, powerful surge of chocolate-colored water, carrying the sediment of the mountains down toward the plains. But as the heat of the summer takes hold and the mountain snows disappear, the flow can dwindle to a gentle, shallow crawl. This natural rhythm, a feast of water in the spring, followed by a long, thirsty summer, presented a challenge for those who wish to live and grow food in this beautiful but arid land. The desert is a place of patience, but it is also a place of unpredictability. Some years, the snow is deep and the river stays high. In other years, the peaks remain dry and the riverbed begins to show its sandy ribs. To survive and thrive here, the inhabitants realized they needed a way to harmonize with the river's cycle. They needed a way to capture the abundance of the spring runoff and save it for the dry, quiet months of the late summer and fall. They needed a way to hold the water back, creating a reserve of stillness that could be called upon when the clouds refused to break. This necessity led to the creation of the great reservoirs, the man-made lakes that now sit like blue jewels set into the red and ochre earth, waiting to tell their own stories of engineering and peace. To understand how we live in balance with the high desert, we must look closely at these quiet, blue expanses known as reservoirs. At its simplest, a reservoir is a man-made lake. It is a place where the natural world and human ingenuity meet to create a sanctuary of stillness. Imagine a vast, open valley where the Rio Grande once wandered freely, its path changing with every season. Now, picture a sturdy, silent wall of stone or concrete stretching across the narrowest point of that valley. This is the dam, a sentinel that stands watch over the river's journey. The physics behind a reservoir are as simple as they are profound. As the river flows down from the mountains, carrying the melted snow and the summer rains, it eventually meets this wall. The water cannot pass, and so it begins to slow down. It begins to rise. One drop joins another, and then a million more, until the valley floor is covered and the water stretches out to touch the feet of the red rock cliffs. The dam doesn't just block the water, it holds it in a powerful, steady embrace. The weight of the water pushes against the dam, and the dam pushes back with the strength of the earth itself. It is a perfect balance of forces, a monumental stillness that creates the deep, cool depths of the lake. In the arid southwest, a reservoir functions much like a savings account for the landscape. In the years when the winter snows are heavy and the spring runoff is abundant, we make a deposit into the reservoir. The water level rises, filling the cracks in the parched earth and creating a vast storehouse of life-giving liquid. Then, when the dry years inevitably come, the years when the clouds are sparse and the river would otherwise run thin, we can make a withdrawal. We release the water slowly and carefully through controlled gates, ensuring that the valleys below remain green and the people have what they need to thrive. This savings account provides a sense of security and peace, a buffer against the unpredictable moods of the desert climate. It allows life to persist in a steady, rhythmic way, even when the environment becomes harsh. As you lie there, imagine the surface of such a lake. It is often as smooth as glass, reflecting the deep blue of the New Mexican sky or the fiery oranges of a desert sunset. The air near the water is a few degrees cooler, carrying a faint, refreshing scent of damp earth and sagebrush. The chaos of the flowing river has been transformed into a profound quiet. This quiet is most evident at the largest of these structures in the state, a place where the scale of the landscape and the scale of human effort truly come together. It is a place named for a giant that watches over the water, a landmark that has seen the river change from a wild, seasonal torrent into a managed, peaceful sea. This giant is a remnant of the Earth's volcanic past, standing as a silent witness to the vast, blue expanse it now overlooks. If you were to stand on the shore of this great lake at twilight, your eyes would be drawn to a singular, striking silhouette rising from the center of the water. It is a dark, towering island that looks remarkably like the back and head of a giant elephant, its massive stone shoulders hunched, as if it is eternally drinking from the cool depths. This is the landmark that gives the reservoir its name, Elephant Butte. It is not a mountain in the traditional sense, but rather a volcanic plug, a core of hardened lava that remained standing long after the softer layers of an ancient volcano were weathered away by wind and time. It stands as a silent, stoic guardian, a remnant of the Earth's fiery past, now cradled by the very element it once resisted. The site of this reservoir is a beautiful contradiction. In every direction, the landscape is defined by the rugged textures of the Chihuahuan Desert, shimmering heat, thorny mesquite, and the deep, dusty ochre of sandstone cliffs. Yet held within these sun-baked walls is a vast, shimmering expanse of sapphire blue. The water is so still and so deep that it seems to pull the color straight from the New Mexican sky, creating a mirror that stretches for 40 miles. As the sun begins to dip lower, the red rocks of the surrounding mesas seem to glow from within, casting long, purple shadows across the surface of the lake. The air here is different. It carries the crisp, clean scent of the high desert, but with an added layer of moisture that softens the dry heat, making each breath feel a little deeper, a little more restorative. To understand the sheer scale of this place, one must look at the numbers, though they are almost too large to visualize easily. When this reservoir is at its peak capacity, it can hold over 2 million acre-feet of water. To give you a sense of that volume, an acre-foot is the amount of water it would take to cover an entire acre of land, roughly the size of a football field, in water 1 foot deep. Now, imagine 2 million of those stacked and spread across the desert floor. It is an incredible concentration of weight and energy, a massive liquid treasury that sustains life for hundreds of miles downstream. As you settle deeper into your pillows, imagine the surface of that water, undisturbed by the wind. Beneath that calm, glassy exterior, there is a profound depth, a hidden world where the pressure of the lake rests against the canyon walls. This didn't happen by accident. It was the result of a monumental vision. Creating a lake of this magnitude in the heart of a desert required more than just a river. It required a feat of human will and a mastery of the physical laws of the universe. The transition from a wild, seasonal river to this peaceful, controlled sea was a journey of stone, sweat, and the quiet, persistent logic of gravity. To hold back 2 million acre-feet of water the world would need a structure unlike anything built before it. A wall of such immense weight and stability that the river itself would have no choice but to stop and rest. Moving from the natural beauty of the volcanic island toward the southern end of the lake, we find the result of that ambition. A wall of concrete that changed the face of the American West forever. At the southern end of the reservoir, the natural chaos of the desert meets the orderly, silent strength of the dam. It is a transition from the organic curves of the mesas to the straight, purposeful lines of human engineering. As you imagine looking down from the top of this structure, you see a massive wall of concrete and stone, a pale gray ribbon that anchors the lake to the earth. There is a profound sense of stillness here. The wind might whistle softly across the concrete lip, but the dam itself does not move. It does not vibrate. It simply exists, holding back the immense power of the Rio Grande with a quiet, unyielding patience. This is what engineers call a gravity dam, and the name itself is a clue to how it works. It doesn't rely on complex mechanical systems or internal supports to hold back the water. Instead, it relies on the most fundamental force in our universe: gravity. A gravity dam is designed to be so heavy, so massive, and so dense that its own weight is enough to resist the horizontal pressure of the water trying to push it downstream. Think of it like a heavy paperweight resting on a desk, or the way a large, smooth stone sits at the bottom of a stream, unmoved by the current. The dam is wider at the base than it is at the top, creating a solid triangular profile that distributes its weight downward into the very bedrock of the canyon. The construction of this particular wall was a feat of endurance and precision. When the Elephant Butte Dam was finally completed in 1916, it was a marvel of the modern world. At that time, it was the largest structure of its kind ever built, a title it held with pride as it began its long service to the valley below. To create it, workers had to mix and pour enormous quantities of concrete, layering it carefully to ensure there were no gaps, no weaknesses. It was built to last for centuries, a permanent fixture in a landscape that is usually defined by erosion and change. As you lie there, you can almost feel the solidity of that concrete, cool to the touch, dense and unwavering. There is something deeply comforting about this kind of strength. It is a passive strength, one that doesn't require effort or action, but simply presence. The dam doesn't fight the river. It simply stands in its way, providing a boundary that allows the water to settle and become a lake. But even in this stillness, there is a fascinating science at play. While the dam uses its weight to stay rooted to the earth, the water behind it is doing something very different. It is pressing against the concrete with a force that increases with every inch of depth. To truly understand the quiet power of the reservoir, we must look closer at the water itself, not just as a blue expanse, but as a physical substance with a weight all its own, stacking up molecule by molecule until it reaches the very bottom of the lake. Imagine for a moment that you are drifting slowly downward from the surface of the lake, leaving the golden light of the New Mexican sun behind. As the water around you transitions into a soft, deep turquoise, you can feel a quiet change in the environment. It isn't a restrictive feeling, but rather a firm, steady embrace. This is the physical reality of the water's weight. Above you, trillions of tiny water molecules are stacked one upon another like a vast, liquid mountain.
Each molecule is incredibly small, yet when they gather in these numbers, their collective presence creates a force that is both silent and monumental. To understand this weight, it helps to think in smaller, more familiar terms.
A single cubic foot of fresh water, a space about the size of a small footstool or a square storage crate, weighs approximately 62.4 pounds. It is a surprising amount of weight for something that feels so light and ethereal when it falls as rain or slips through your fingers. When you consider the millions upon millions of cubic feet held within a reservoir like Elephant Butte, the scale of that weight becomes almost impossible to grasp. It is a heavy blue blanket resting against the face of the dam, pressing with a constant, unwavering intent. At the very bottom, near the base of that massive concrete wall we spoke of, the pressure is at its greatest. The water there has the weight of the entire lake resting on its shoulders. And yet, there is no chaos in this pressure. It is a perfectly ordered distribution of force, a balanced equation of physics that the dam was built specifically to handle. The engineers who designed this structure understood the mathematics of this weight perfectly. They knew that the pressure would increase linearly with depth, which is why the dam is so much thicker at its base than at its crest. They built a foundation that could anchor that pressure directly into the ancient bedrock of the canyon floor. It is a silent dialogue between the liquid and the stone, a partnership of gravity and mass that has remained stable for over 100 years. Even with all this strength and the massive weight of the water being held in place, a reservoir is not meant to be a static, unchanging thing. It is a living system that must occasionally breathe. There are seasons when the snowmelt in the northern mountains is especially abundant, or when the late summer monsoons bring a sudden, heavy gift of rain to the high plateau. In these moments, the reservoir reaches its capacity, and the weight of the water begins to search for a new path. To keep the balance perfect and the structure safe, there must be a way for the water to be released in a controlled, gentle manner. This is where the engineering shifts from the heavy stillness of holding to the graceful science of movement, guiding the water toward the specialized safety valves of the landscape. These safety valves are known as spillways. You might think of them as the gentle release of a long-held breath. Every reservoir, no matter how large or sturdy, must have a way to manage its own abundance. The spillway is the primary tool for this task, an elegantly engineered bypass that ensures the water never rises high enough to challenge the integrity of the dam itself. If you have ever looked closely at a household sink or a bathtub, you may have noticed a small, circular opening near the top. This is a miniature spillway, a simple overflow drain designed to provide a safe path for water if the basin becomes too full. On the scale of a massive reservoir, the concept remains the same, though the execution is a marvel of landscape architecture. When the snow melt from the northern peaks is particularly heavy, or when a series of late summer storms fills the canyons with unexpected rain, the water level in the reservoir begins to climb toward its limit. Before it can ever reach the top of the concrete wall, it finds the lip of the spillway. In some designs, this is a wide concrete-lined chute that looks like a giant slide carved into the side of a hill. In others, it is a morning glory spillway, a vast circular funnel that sits out in the water, appearing like a calm, bottomless drain. As the water reaches the edge, it begins to slide over the rim in a smooth, glass-like curve. There's something deeply hypnotic about this movement. It is the transition from the stillness of the lake to the focused energy of the stream. Engineers designed these structures with an incredible amount of foresight. They use a standard known as the 100-year flood, to determine how large and robust a spillway must be. This term is often misunderstood. It doesn't mean a flood that happens exactly once every century. Instead, it refers to a flood of such magnitude that there is only a 1% chance of it occurring in any single year. By designing for these rare, extreme events, the engineers create a massive margin of safety. They ensure that even in the most extraordinary circumstances, the water has a predictable, controlled path to follow. This careful planning allows the reservoir to act as a buffer for the world below, absorbing the sudden shocks of nature and releasing them as a steady, manageable flow. As the water moves through the spillway, it is guided back toward the original riverbed, far below the dam's foundation. It tumbles over baffle blocks or into stilling basins, structures designed specifically to break the water's speed and dissipate its energy. By the time the water rejoins the river, its wildness has been tamed, and it flows onward with a quiet, renewed purpose. This management of overflow is a testament to the balance we strike with the natural world, a way of honoring the river's power while protecting the life that flourishes in its wake. While the Rio Grande and its reservoirs, like Elephant Butte, provide a grand example of this balance, they are only part of the story. If we let our minds wander eastward, crossing over the high mountain passes and descending toward the rolling plains, we encounter another vital artery of the New Mexican landscape. This is the Pecos River, the eastern sibling to the Rio Grande. Like its brother to the west, the Pecos is a winding path of life that depends on its own network of reservoirs to sustain the desert through the changing seasons. The transition from one river basin to the next is a shift in geography, but the fundamental science of the water remains the same. A patient, constant journey from the high peaks down to the thirsty earth below. Imagine leaving the banks of the Rio Grande and drifting eastward, crossing the vast, sun-drenched plains and climbing over the rugged spine of the mountains. As we descend the eastern slopes, we find ourselves in the company of the Pecos River, the quiet, winding sibling to the Rio Grande. While the Rio Grande feels like the grand spine of the state, the Pecos is a silver thread that weaves its way through a landscape of hidden wonders and ancient stone. The journey of the Pecos begins in a place of immense peace, high in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, north of Santa Fe. Here, at elevations exceeding 12,000 feet, the river is born from the slow melt of winter snow and the soft touch of summer rains. In these subalpine meadows, the water is crystal clear and bitingly cold, tumbling over granite boulders and through forests of spruce and fir. It is a humble beginning for a river that will eventually travel over 900 miles to join the Rio Grande in Texas. But even here, in its infancy, the Pecos carries the promise of life for the arid lands below. As the river leaves the high peaks and flows southward, the geology of the land begins to change. The hard, igneous rocks of the mountains give way to the softer, more mysterious formations of the eastern plains. This is a landscape defined by karst topography, a scientific term for terrain shaped by the dissolving of soluble rocks like limestone, gypsum, and dolomite. You might visualize the earth here as a great, slow-motion sponge. Over thousands of years, the slightly acidic rainwater has eaten away at the stone, creating a hidden world of sinkholes, underground caverns, and subterranean streams. The Pecos River interacts with this karst landscape in a way that is truly unique. In some stretches, the river seems to perform a disappearing act, its waters sinking into the porous ground, only to reappear miles later as a series of cool, deep blue springs. This connection between the surface water and the hidden world beneath the earth is a delicate dance of chemistry and physics. The water doesn't just flow over the land, it breathes through it, filtering through the stone and emerging enriched with minerals. This winding path creates a sense of profound solitude. Unlike the broad, straight reaches of some rivers, the Pecos meanders with a gentle, unhurried grace. It carves deep canyons into the red sandstone and winds through wide valleys where the grass sways in the constant desert wind. Because the terrain is so porous, the river has had to work harder over the eons to maintain its course, resulting in a path that is intricate and full of surprises.
To live alongside the Pecos is to understand the value of patience. Because the river flows through such thirsty, permeable ground, every drop is precious. To manage this wandering spirit and ensure that the water is available when the summer heat is at its peak, a series of reservoirs has been established along its New Mexican course. These man-made lakes act as anchors, holding the mountain snowmelt in place before it can vanish into the limestone depths or rush away toward the sea. As we follow the river's curve further south, leaving the shadows of the Sangre de Cristos behind, we come upon the first of these vital sanctuaries, places where the wild energy of the Pecos is gathered and held in a shimmering blue embrace, cradled in the silence of the desert. As the horizon widens and the Pecos River continues its southward trek, the landscape shifts into the northern reaches of the Chihuahuan Desert. Here, amidst the scrub brush and the low, rolling hills of gypsum and limestone, we find a sudden, startling expanse of blue. This is Brantley Lake, a sanctuary of water in an environment where moisture is the most precious of all currencies. When you look out over the surface of the lake at twilight, the water seems to absorb the deepening purple of the sky, becoming a mirror for the first few stars that brave the dusk. It is a place of profound stillness, where the only sound might be the soft lap of a small wave against the shore, or the distant, lonely call of a shorebird. This reservoir, though it looks like it has always been a part of the desert, is a testament to the lessons learned by those who first tried to tame the Pecos. Long before Brantley Lake was filled in the late 1980s, there was another structure nearby called the McMillan Dam. Built in the late 19th century, McMillan was an ambitious project, but the engineers of that era were still learning about the unique challenges of New Mexico's geology. Because the ground here is so porous, riddled with the sinkholes and hidden channels of the karst topography we spoke of, McMillan Dam struggled to hold its treasure. The water would often seep into the very earth it was meant to rest upon, vanishing into the underground labyrinths or being lost to the silt that slowly filled the basin. Brantley Lake was designed to solve this puzzle and provide a more permanent safety net for the region. Completed in 1989, it sits further downstream, acting as a much larger and more secure basin to catch what the older dams could not. It is a massive undertaking of earth and stone, stretching across the basin to create a storage capacity that ensures the lower Pecos Valley remains productive even when the rains fail to arrive. This transition from the old leaky McMillan to the modern Brantley represents a significant milestone in our understanding of how to work with, rather than against, the difficult terrain of the high desert. The primary reason for this great gathering of water is a process that has defined human civilization in the desert for millennia: irrigation. Brantley Lake is the vital heart of the Carlsbad Irrigation District. Without the water stored here, the lush green fields that surprise travelers near the city of Carlsbad would simply not exist. The reservoir holds the snowmelt
and the occasional heavy rains of the monsoon season, releasing them in a controlled, steady pulse to nourish over 25,000 acres of farmland. This managed flow allows the desert to bloom in ways that would be impossible if the river were left to its own erratic cycles of flood and drought. In the desert, water is more than just a resource. It is a transformation. It is the bridge between the parched, brown earth and the vibrant green of growing things. As we watch the moonlight dance on the ripples of Brantley Lake, we can begin to see the reservoir not just as a body of water, but as a promise, a savings account of life-giving liquid that will soon make its way through a complex network of canals and ditches. This journey, from the deep stillness of the lake to the thirsty roots of a crop, is a marvel of both nature and engineering. It is the story of how a single drop of water, held back by a dam in the silence of the night, eventually becomes the food that sustains us. To understand the reservoir is to understand the irrigation system it feeds, a system that turns the dust of the Mesilla and Pecos valleys into some of the most fertile ground in the American West. Imagine a single drop of water held for months in the deep, cool shadows of a reservoir. At just the right moment, a gate is lifted. There is no rush, only a steady, purposeful release. This drop begins a journey of many miles, leaving the vast expanse of the lake to enter the narrow, winding veins of the valley. It travels through concrete-lined canals and earthen ditches, moving quietly past sun-baked banks where dragonflies hover in the heat. This is the lifeblood of the Mesilla Valley, a stretch of land that, without this guided flow, would remain a landscape of creosote and cactus. As you settle deeper into your pillow, imagine that water arriving at the edge of a field. It doesn't just sit on the surface, it sinks into the thirsty, mineral-rich earth. Desert soil is often misunderstood. It is not empty or dead. It is packed with minerals like calcium and potassium that have waited centuries for a drink. When the water arrives, the earth seems to exhale. There is a specific scent, a soft, dusty fragrance of damp earth and awakening roots. You can almost feel the ground softening, the hard-baked crust giving way to a dark, rich loam. In this moment of contact, the desert is transformed. Because of this careful management of water, the Mesilla Valley has become one of the most productive agricultural regions in the world. If you were to walk through it at twilight, you would see miles of perfectly aligned trees, the great pecan orchards. Their canopy is so thick and lush that it creates a private, shaded world beneath the desert sun, a cool microclimate where the air feels heavy and sweet. New Mexico is consistently one of the top producers of pecans in the entire world, a feat made possible only by the steady savings account of the reservoirs. And then, of course, there is the green chili. The long, bright pods thrive in this specific combination of intense, high-altitude sunlight and deep, controlled irrigation. The flavor of a New Mexico green chili is a direct product of the minerals in the soil and the cool mountain water delivered by the dams. It is a taste of the landscape itself, distilled through the roots of a plant. This practice of moving water to where it is needed most is not a modern invention. While our dams are massive and our canals are often lined with modern materials, the spirit of this work is as old as the hills themselves. Long before the first concrete was poured, The inhabitants of this land looked at the rivers and the dry soil and understood that their survival depended on a shared communal effort to guide the flow. This tradition of moving water through the landscape is a thread that connects the modern engineer to the ancient farmer, to a time when water management was not just a matter of physics, but a sacred social contract that bound a community together. To understand how we feed the valley today, we must look back at the wisdom of those who first carved paths for the water to follow. This ancient wisdom is embodied in the Acequia system, a network of community-managed irrigation ditches that predate the state of New Mexico itself. The word acequia carries a soft, rhythmic quality, much like the water that flows through these narrow, hand-dug channels. These are not merely utility lines. They are the lifeblood of the high desert villages, weaving together the landscape and the people in a tapestry of shared responsibility. In a place where water is as precious as gold, the acequia represents a philosophy of El agua es la vida. Water is life, and it belongs to everyone who tends the land. As you lie there, imagine the sound of water diverted from a main river into one of these earthen veins. It doesn't rush with the roar of a spillway. It moves with a gentle, steady gurgle, brushing against the long grasses and wild mint that grow along its banks. This system is governed by a social structure that has remained largely unchanged for centuries. At the heart of it is the mayordomo, the elected watermaster. The mayordomo's role is one of quiet authority and deep observation. They walk the banks, clearing debris, checking the flow, and ensuring that each neighbor receives their fair share of the reparto, or the water distribution. It is a role built on trust and the understanding that the survival of one depends on the cooperation of all. There is a profound sense of permanence in these ditches. Some New Mexican acequias have been in continuous daily use for over 300 years. Think of that for a moment. The same path, the same gravity, the same cool mountain water serving 10 generations of the same family. While the world around them changed, while empires rose and fell and technologies advanced, the water continued its slow, patient journey through these channels. This longevity is a testament to a way of living that respects the limits of the environment rather than trying to overpower them. This old-world wisdom forms the foundation upon which our modern water science is built. Even today, as we use satellite imagery and complex computer models to manage our massive reservoirs, the core principle remains the same: the careful, communal stewardship of a finite resource. We have learned to scale this ancient knowledge, moving from small village ditches to massive engineering projects that span hundreds of miles. But to meet the growing needs of a modern desert, we eventually had to look beyond the rivers we could see, seeking new ways to bring water across the great barriers of the earth. We began to look toward the mountains, imagining a way to move water not just along the valleys, but through the very heart of the peaks themselves. To look upon the high, jagged peaks of the San Juan Mountains is to see the great continental divide, a natural spine that decides the fate of every raindrop. On one side of this ridge, the water begins a long journey toward the Pacific Ocean. On the other, it flows toward the Atlantic. For eons, these paths were set in stone, unchangeable and final. But in the mid-20th century, humans began to wonder if they could bridge that divide, bringing water from the lush, snow-heavy western slopes to the thirsty valleys of the Rio Grande. This is the story of trans-mountain diversion, a feat of quiet, monumental engineering that happens largely out of sight deep within the earth. Imagine, if you will, the San Juan Chama project. It is a system of dams, siphons, and tunnels that acts as a hidden artery for the state. While the acequias we spoke of earlier are open to the sky, these channels are tucked away in the darkness of the mountains. The project begins by gathering water from 3 tributaries of the San Juan River: the Blanco, the Little Navajo, and the Navajo. These streams are part of the Colorado River Basin, meaning their water was originally destined for the Gulf of California. Through a series of diversion dams, this water is gently coaxed into a new path, beginning a journey that will eventually lead it through the very heart of the Continental Divide. The most remarkable parts of this journey are the tunnels. The Acequia Tunnel, the longest of them, stretches for nearly 13 miles. As you rest, imagine the immense stillness inside that tunnel. It is a concrete-lined passage, roughly 10 feet in diameter, carving a straight line through the ancient rock, hundreds of feet beneath the mountain forests and the wandering elk. There is no wind there and no light, only the steady, rhythmic pulse of water sliding over the smooth floor. It is a silent migration of liquid, moving from one side of the world's divide to the other, powered entirely by the patient pull of gravity. This project is a vital lifeline for the modern desert. It brings roughly 90,000 acre-feet of water each year into the Rio Grande Basin, providing a significant portion of the drinking water for cities like Albuquerque and Santa Fe. It is a reminder of how we have learned to work with the geography of the earth, finding ways to share the abundance of the high peaks with the dry plains below. Take a slow breath now, feeling the same steady rhythm in your own body that guides the water through those mountain tunnels. Just as the water finds its way through the darkness to emerge into the light of the Rio Chama, you can let go of the day's complexities, moving toward a place of deep, undisturbed rest. We often think of water as something that exists only where we can see it, in the rushing rivers, the still reservoirs, or the falling rain. But the San Juan Chama project reminds us that water can move in ways that are invisible to the eye, hidden behind walls of stone or tucked away in the secrets of the landscape. And yet, even these massive tunnels represent only a small fraction of the water that exists out of sight. While we have built great works to move water through the mountains, nature has its own way of storing vast quantities of life-giving liquid where no sun can reach it. Beneath the very ground you walk upon, and the bed where you now lie, there is another world of water, a hidden ocean that has been gathering for thousands of years, waiting silently in the dark spaces between the grains of the earth. Imagine for a moment the ground beneath you, beneath the floorboards of your home, the deep foundation and the cooling layers of the desert soil. There is a world of quiet permanence. We often call it groundwater, but that simple term hardly captures the true scale of what lies below. It is a hidden ocean, not one of rolling waves or crashing tides, but an ocean of profound stillness. This water isn't sloshing in great empty caverns. Instead, it is held within the very fabric of the earth itself. It lives in the tiny microscopic pores between grains of ancient sand, in the narrow fissures of fractured limestone, and within the honeycomb structures of volcanic rock. This is the aquifer, a vast subterranean reservoir that requires no concrete dam to hold it in place. The earth itself serves as the vessel, cradling the water in a cold, dark, and silent embrace. There is a profound and ancient relationship between the blue lakes we see under the sun and these deep reaches of the earth. When we look at the shimmering surface of a reservoir like Elephant Butte, we are only seeing the topmost chapter of a much longer story. In the high desert, the surface water and the groundwater are in a constant, slow-motion conversation. They are parts of a single, unified system. When the Rio Grande runs high with the spring snowmelt, some of that water gently leans into the sandy banks and begins to sink, leaving the world of light to join the aquifer below. During the long, lean months of drought, the process may reverse, as the aquifer slowly and generously breathes its moisture back into the riverbed, keeping the silver thread of the river alive, even when the sky offers no rain. It is a remarkable fact that for the vast majority of people living in this rugged landscape, the water they rely on for their very lives comes from this invisible source. Much of New Mexico's drinking water is pumped from these underground aquifers, some of which sit hundreds of feet below the surface. For many generations, this was the primary source of life for desert communities, providing water that is naturally cool and remarkably pure. Because it is tucked away so deeply, it is protected from the harsh, drying winds and the intense heat of the sun, which would otherwise steal it away. When you turn on a tap in the high desert, you are often touching a resource that has been shielded from the outside world for a very long time. This brings us to the beautiful and patient concept of recharge. Just as you are currently recharging your own energy, letting your body settle and your mind grow quiet, the earth must also find ways to replenish its hidden stores. But while a surface reservoir might rise several feet after a single heavy monsoon, the deep aquifer moves at a much different pace, the pace of the mountains and the stars. It is a slow, methodical journey of replenishment. Every drop of water that eventually joins this hidden ocean must first find a way to navigate the long path from the surface downward. It is a descent that requires great patience as the water begins to seep through the upper layers of the world, beginning a journey of filtration and discovery that can last far longer than a human lifetime. It is a reminder that in the natural world, the most important movements are often the ones we cannot see, occurring in the deep, velvet silence of the earth. Imagine a single drop of water, perhaps caught from a summer rain or released from the gentle edges of a reservoir. It touches the dry, porous soil of the high desert and begins a journey that most of us will never witness. This is the science of seepage, a quiet, persistent movement that defines the very life of the desert. As the drop sinks beneath the surface, it enters a world of gravity and grain. It isn't a sudden fall, but a slow, deliberate percolation. The soil beneath the New Mexican landscape is not a solid mass, but a complex labyrinth of tiny spaces between particles of sand, silt, and clay. This is where the water finds its path, moving through the darkness with a steady, unhurried rhythm. As the water travels through these microscopic gaps, the earth begins its work as a master architect of purity. This is one of nature's most effective and ancient filtration systems. The layers of sand and gravel act like a natural sieve, physically trapping larger particles and sediments. But on a deeper level, something even more profound happens. The surfaces of these soil particles often hold a slight electrical charge, attracting and binding to various minerals and impurities. By the time a drop of water has traveled even a few feet into the ground, it is already being transformed, shedding the dust and debris of the surface world to become something clearer and more refined. It is a process of shedding the weight of the world, much like you are shedding the weight of your day right now. This journey is not measured in minutes or hours, but in decades and centuries. It is a startling fact of hydrology that for a drop of water to travel from the surface to the deep heart of a New Mexican aquifer, it can take hundreds of years. The water being pumped from the ground today may have first fallen as snow on the peaks of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, long before the invention of the automobile, or even before the state of New Mexico was officially founded. It has been traveling in the cool dark, moving perhaps only inches a year, patiently waiting to join the hidden ocean below. This slow-motion migration creates a sense of profound stability. While the world above changes with the seasons and the winds, the world below remains constant, governed by the unhurried laws of geology. Think about that scale of time for a moment. Hundreds of years of quiet, steady progress. In our busy waking lives, we often feel the pressure of the next minute or the coming hour. But the earth beneath you is operating on a much grander, more patient clock. There is no rush in the seepage of water through the sand. There is only the steady, rhythmic pull of the earth. As you lie there, you can allow yourself to mirror this pace. You don't need to be anywhere or do anything quickly. Like the water moving through the deep layers of the desert, you can simply exist in this moment of transition, letting the worries of the day filter away, leaving only a sense of calm and clarity. The desert knows how to wait. It knows how to store its treasures in the dark, away from the heat and the noise. And as we consider the silent, slow-moving water beneath the high plateau, we can begin to appreciate the stillness that surrounds us now. The air is cooling, the stars are watching over the reservoirs, and the vast, dry landscape is settling into its nightly rest. Take a moment now to simply listen to the silence of the high desert night. It is a specific kind of quiet, one that feels vast and expansive, as if the very air is holding its breath. In the high plateaus and basins of New Mexico, the atmosphere is thin and clean, stripped of the heavy humidity found in lower coastal lands. This dryness allows the heat of the day to radiate quickly back into the atmosphere and out toward the stars, leaving behind a crisp, refreshing coolness that settles over the mesas and the canyons like a soft, invisible blanket. It is a transition that happens every evening, a reliable cooling that signals to the desert's inhabitants that the time for rest has arrived. As you lie there, I invite you to take a slow, deep breath in. Feel that cool, dry air fill your lungs, bringing with it the faint, clean scent of sun-baked earth and distant sagebrush. And as you exhale, let your shoulders sink an inch deeper into the mattress. Release the tension you might be carrying in your jaw or behind your eyes. Let the muscles in your neck and back soften. There is no need to hold yourself up anymore. The surface beneath you is solid and supportive, just as the ancient bedrock supports the billions of gallons of water in the reservoirs we've been discussing. The desert is often thought of as a place of extremes, but at night, those extremes find a gentle, restorative balance. The roar of the wind that often dances across the plains during the afternoon has faded to a mere whisper, or perhaps has vanished entirely. The surface of the reservoir, which might have been chopped into whitecaps by the afternoon breeze, is now becoming as still and smooth as a sheet of dark obsidian. If you were standing on the shore of Elephant Butte or Brantley Lake right now, You would see the stars of the Milky Way reflected so clearly in the water that it would be hard to tell where the earth ends and the heavens begin. The water acts as a perfect mirror, doubling the beauty of the cosmos and bringing the stars down to earth. This stillness is more than just a lack of sound. It is a presence. It is the sound of the landscape recovering, of the plants and the soil finally finding relief from the intensity of the sun. In this quiet, you can almost feel the rhythm of the land, a slow, steady heartbeat that matches the pace of your own relaxed breathing. The water in the reservoir is resting, its immense weight pressing down with a calm, unwavering force, and you can allow yourself to rest with it. There is no urgency here, no rushing current. There is only the steady, patient existence of the desert. Take another slow breath, feeling the rhythm of the night. The world is wide, the sky is deep, and for this moment, everything is exactly as it should be. The water is still, the air is calm. You are safe, and you are settled. But even in this profound stillness, the desert is never truly empty. While the deep centers of the reservoirs are quiet and dark, the edges, the places where the water meets the dry New Mexican soil, are beginning to hum with a different kind of energy. This thin ribbon of life, where the blue of the lake meets the red and gold of the earth, is one of the most vibrant and essential parts of the entire ecosystem. As we move our focus from the silence of the air and the depths of the water, we begin to see the lush, green world that depends on these man-made lakes for its very survival. This fringe of life is a testament to the power of water in an arid land, and it is where the story of the reservoir becomes a story of life itself. As your mind drifts toward the shoreline, imagine the sudden and miraculous change in the landscape. Just a few hundred yards back, the earth is dominated by creosote bushes, hardy grasses, and the dry, sandy soil of the high plateau. But as you approach the water's edge, the world undergoes a transformation. The dusty browns and muted grays of the desert floor give way to a vibrant, deep emerald green. This is the Riparian zone, the narrow, verdant ribbon of life that clings to the banks of the Rio Grande and the edges of its reservoirs. It is a place where the parched earth finally finds its thirst quenched, and the result is an explosion of life that feels almost like a secret garden hidden within the vastness of the Southwest. The word riparian comes from the Latin word for a riverbank, but it describes much more than just a location. It describes a relationship, a delicate, beautiful partnership between the flowing water and the soil that holds it. In these zones, the water table is high enough that plants don't have to wait for the rare and unpredictable monsoon rains. Their roots can reach down through the soft mud and sand to drink deeply every single day. Because of this constant, reliable access to moisture, the vegetation here doesn't just grow, it flourishes. It creates a lush, dense canopy and a thick understory that provides shade, food, and shelter in a land that is often defined by the intensity of its sun. It is a staggering thought that in a state as vast and diverse as New Mexico, these green zones make up less than 1% of the total land area. They are incredibly rare, like thin threads of silk woven into a massive tapestry. Yet, despite their small footprint, they are the vital heart of the entire ecosystem. Scientists and ecologists have found that more than 80% of all wildlife species in the American Southwest depend on these riparian areas at some point in their life cycles. Whether it is a place to find food, a safe path for migration, or a cool spot to raise their young, the wildlife of the desert flocks to these edges. They are the grocery stores, the nurseries, and the sanctuaries of the high desert. In the cool of the night, if you were to walk softly along the edge of a reservoir like Elephant Butte, you would feel the temperature drop as you entered this green fringe. The plants here act as a natural air conditioner, transpiring moisture into the air and trapping the coolness of the water under their leaves. You might see the delicate tracks of a mule deer in the damp silt, where it stepped carefully out from the shadows to take a long, slow drink. You might hear the soft rustle of a beaver moving through the cattails, or the distant, rhythmic call of a toad. This area is a bustling hub of activity, yet it feels profoundly peaceful, cradled by the stillness of the water on one side and the quiet of the desert on the other. The riparian zone also serves as a protector for the water itself. The dense network of roots from grasses and shrubs acts as a natural filter, cleaning the runoff before it enters the reservoir and holding the banks together against the force of erosion. It is a living bridge between the liquid world and the solid world. And while the smaller plants provide the texture of this landscape, the true architecture of the riparian zone is defined by the giants that tower over the water's edge. These are the great sentinels of the river, the trees that have stood for generations with their feet in the water and their heads in the clouds, creating the iconic silhouette of the New Mexican bosque. As we look closer at these towering figures, we begin to hear the unique music they make in the evening breeze. If you listen closely as the sun dips below the horizon, you can hear the desert begin to speak in a voice that is both ancient and soothing. It is the sound of the wind moving through the leaves of the Rio Grande cottonwood. This sound is unlike any other in the forest. It is a soft, rhythmic clapping, a gentle rustle that sounds remarkably like the movement of water itself. This happens because the stems of the cottonwood leaves are flat and flexible. Instead of resisting the wind, they twist and shimmer, fluttering against each other in even the lightest of breezes. In the quiet of the New Mexican night, this sound becomes a natural lullaby, a constant whispering presence that fills the air around the reservoirs and the riverbanks. These trees are the true giants of the high desert, reaching skyward with massive, gnarled trunks and spreading wide their canopy of heart-shaped leaves to catch the fading light. This forest, known throughout the state as the bosque, is a very special place. The word bosque is Spanish for woods or forest, but in the Southwest, it refers specifically to the lush gallery forests that line the river valleys. The Rio Grande bosque is one of the largest cottonwood forests left in the entire world, a continuous ribbon of green that defies the arid brown landscape surrounding it. For centuries, these trees have stood as a testament to the life-giving power of the water. They are deeply connected to the seasonal pulse of the river. In the days before the great dams were built, the spring snowmelt would cause the Rio Grande to overflow its banks, depositing fresh layers of silt and moisture. It is only in this wet, sun-drenched mud that the cottonwood seeds, small and wrapped in fluffy white fibers, can take root and begin their long journey toward the sky. When you imagine standing beneath these giants, you can almost feel the history they hold. Some of the older trees have trunks so wide that two people could not join hands around them. Their bark is thick and deeply furrowed, like the weathered face of the earth itself. In the late spring, the air is often filled with their cotton, the soft, downy seeds that drift through the air like summer snow, settling on the surface of the water and carpeting the forest floor in white. It is a slow, beautiful cycle of life that is repeated for thousands of years. Even though the reservoirs now manage the flow of the water, preventing the massive floods of the past, the cottonwoods remain the heart of the ecosystem, providing a vertical world of habitat in a landscape that is otherwise vast and open. As you settle deeper into your blankets, think of the cool shade these trees provide during the heat of the day, and the way they hold the stillness of the night. The branches are thick and sturdy, creating a complex architecture of limbs and hollows. These are the high-rise apartments of the desert. They offer safety from the wind and a perfect vantage point over the shimmering surface of the lake. And as the seasons change, these whispering giants become more than just a home for local residents. They become a vital landmark, a green beacon visible from high above. The rustling leaves and the steady presence of the trees signal to travelers from faraway lands that they have found a place of refuge. These travelers are the winged wanderers of the sky, who rely on the bosque and the reservoirs as they navigate the invisible paths of the atmosphere. If you were to look up from the shade of those cottonwoods, past the shimmering leaves, and into the vast open blue of the New Mexican sky, you might witness one of the most ancient and rhythmic movements on our planet. This is the Central Flyway, a great invisible highway in the sky that stretches from the frozen reaches of the Arctic all the way down to the tip of South America. Every year, twice a year, millions of birds follow this path, guided by the stars, the Earth's magnetic field, and the silver thread of the Rio Grande below. To these winged travelers, the high desert is a challenging landscape of rock and sun. But the reservoirs we have discussed serve as vital, life-saving oases in a sea of sand. Imagine the perspective of a bird high above the clouds. For hundreds of miles, the ground may be dry and brown, offering little in the way of food or safety. But then, a glimmer appears on the horizon. A vast, sapphire blue expanse of water held in the cradle of the red hills. These reservoirs are much more than just storage for human use. They are critical rest stops for the weary. When a flock of geese or a solitary osprey sees the wide surface of a lake like Elephant Butte, they see a place to land, to hydrate, and to find a meal before the next leg of their journey. Among the most iconic of these travelers are the sandhill cranes. These elegant gray birds, with their long necks and crimson crowns, are living fossils. Their lineage can be traced back millions of years. Every autumn they begin a staggering journey. Sandhill cranes can travel over 2,000 miles to spend their winters in the wetlands and river valleys of New Mexico. They move in large social groups, and as they approach the water, they descend in beautiful, spiraling glides, their long legs reaching out to touch the surface. During the day, they forage in the nearby fields, but as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, they return to the safety of the water. The reservoirs provide a unique kind of security. By standing in the shallow reaches or resting on the small islands created by the dams, these birds are protected from land-based predators. You might imagine the sound of thousands of wings settling at once, a soft, rushing sound like the wind through the trees. Along with the cranes, you will find snow geese, which congregate in such massive numbers that when they take flight together, It looks like a sudden, swirling blizzard of white against the desert blue. There are ducks of every variety, from the mallard with its iridescent green head to the tiny, fast-moving teal. As the night deepens and the birds tuck their heads beneath their wings, the surface of the reservoir becomes a quiet mirror for the stars. The movement above the water begins to still, but the story of life in these desert lakes does not end at the surface. The birds are here because of the abundance the water provides, and as they drift in their sleep, they are floating above a complex, hidden world. Beneath the gentle ripples and the reflections of the moon, an entirely different community is thriving in the cool, dark depths. The life that swims beneath the surface is just as diverse and specialized as the life that flies above it, adapted to the unique conditions of these man-made mountain lakes. Deep beneath the resting cranes, the water remains remarkably still, holding its breath in the cool shadows of the reservoir's floor. It is a common misconception that the desert is a place of little life. In reality, these pockets of water are teeming with a surprising variety of aquatic creatures, each adapted to the unique rhythms of the Southwest. While the surface reflects the silver of the moon, the world below is one of muted greens and deep blues, where life moves at a slower, more rhythmic pace. One of the most significant, though perhaps the smallest inhabitants of these waters, is the Rio Grande silvery minnow. This little fish, barely longer than a human finger, is a symbol of the river's endurance and the delicate balance of the ecosystem. It has a fascinating and ancient way of ensuring the next generation survives. The silvery minnow is what scientists call a pelagic spawner. Unlike many other fish that hide their eggs in gravel or nests, the minnow releases its eggs directly into the moving current of the river. These eggs are semi-buoyant, drifting like tiny translucent bubbles through the water for miles before they hatch. It is a delicate, floating journey, perfectly timed with the natural spring pulses of the river, and the reservoirs play a complicated role in managing the flows that these tiny travelers depend on. In the higher, colder reaches of the state's watersheds, near the inlets where mountain streams feed into the reservoirs, we find the Gila trout. This is a fish of the high country, with shimmering golden yellow scales and fine, dark spots that look like a scattering of pepper across its back. The Gila trout is one of the rarest trout species in the world, once found only in the headwaters of the Gila River system. In the quiet, deep pools where the water slows down, these trout hover almost motionlessly, their fins moving just enough to hold their position against the gentle subterranean flow. They represent the wild, untouched spirit of the high desert mountains. The creation of large reservoirs has introduced a new dynamic to this desert landscape, creating habitats that did not exist a century ago. These deep, stable bodies of water have become a sanctuary for species that prefer the stillness of a lake over the rush of a river. Beneath the surface, you might find the slow, powerful movement of a channel catfish, or the patient shadow of a largemouth bass hiding near a submerged rock. These fish inhabit a world of quiet pressure and constant temperature, finding shelter in the drowned topography of the land, the old canyons and hilltops that were submerged when the dams were closed. The reservoirs act as a sort of liquid canyon, providing a depth and stability that the original shallow riverbeds could never offer. Here, life is protected from the harsh extremes of the desert sun and the biting cold of the winter wind. But even in these deep, protected reaches, the water is part of a constant, silent exchange with the world above. While the fish find their peace in the cool dark, the surface of the lake is always interacting with the dry, hungry air of the New Mexican plateau. The very water that provides a home for the minnow and the trout is slowly, invisibly being drawn back into the sky, beginning a journey from the liquid depths back into the vastness of the atmosphere. As you lie there, perfectly still, imagine the vast blue surface of a lake like Elephant Butte under the wide New Mexican sky. While the fish swim in the cool darkness below, the very top layer of the water is engaged in a silent, eternal conversation with the sun. This process is evaporation, a quiet transformation where liquid water turns into an invisible vapor and rises to join the clouds. In the high desert, this isn't just a small natural occurrence. It is a significant part of the water cycle, often referred to by hydrologists as the invisible thief. The sun's work is gentle but persistent. On a calm day, you wouldn't see it happening. There are no bubbles, no steam, and no sound. But molecule by molecule, the water at the surface gains just enough energy from the sunlight to break free from its neighbors. In the thin, crisp air of the high plateau, this happens much more readily than it does at sea level. The air in New Mexico is famously dry, with very low humidity, which means the atmosphere is always hungry for moisture. Like a sponge that has been wrung out tight, the desert air reaches down to the surface of every reservoir, pulling water upward into the blue. This effect is amplified by the geography of the state. Because New Mexico sits at a high elevation, the atmosphere is thinner, allowing more of the sun's radiant energy to reach the water's surface. When you combine that intense sunlight with the frequent desert winds that sweep across the open plains, you create the perfect conditions for water to vanish. At Elephant Butte, the largest reservoir in the state, the impact is staggering. Because the lake is wide and relatively shallow in many areas, it exposes a massive amount of surface area to the sky. Scientific measurements show that in a typical year, the reservoir can lose between 5 and 7 feet of its depth to evaporation alone. To put that into perspective, imagine the entire surface of that massive lake dropping by the height of a tall person, simply vanishing into the air. This can account for hundreds of thousands of acre-feet of water every year, sometimes more water than is actually used by the cities and farms downstream. It is a reminder of the delicate balance required to manage resources in an arid land. The water we see is always in motion, even when the lake looks as smooth and still as a sheet of glass. Engineers and scientists spend a great deal of time studying how to minimize this quiet loss. One of the most effective ways is through the design of the reservoirs themselves. Whenever possible, it is better to store water in deep, narrow canyons rather than broad, shallow basins. By reducing the amount of water that touches the air, you reduce the opportunity for the sun to steal it away. In some smaller systems, researchers have even experimented with floating covers or shade balls to block the sunlight. Though on a lake as large as Elephant Butte, such a task is nearly impossible. Instead, management often involves moving water between different reservoirs at different times of the year, trying to keep as much as possible in the cooler, higher altitude lakes where the air is less demanding. As the water rises invisibly toward the stars, the reservoir remains a place of profound stillness. But while the top of the lake is slowly thinning out into the atmosphere, another process is happening at the very bottom. While the invisible thief takes from the surface, the rivers that feed the lake are bringing something new to the depths. Just as the air pulls moisture upward, gravity is pulled downward, carrying with it the tiny grains of the earth that have traveled hundreds of miles to find a final resting place on the lake bed. While the sun works at the surface, quietly reclaiming water for the sky, gravity is busy at the bottom of the reservoir, performing a much heavier task. This is the story of silt and sediment, the slow, inevitable process of the earth finding its way home. When we look at a lake like Elephant Butte or Acequia, we see a vast body of blue. But beneath that blue is a floor that is constantly, imperceptibly rising. Every reservoir in the world is, in a sense, a temporary feature of the landscape, a giant bowl that the river is slowly trying to fill back up with the very mountains it has carved away. Think for a moment about the journey of a single grain of sand. It might have begun its life as part of a granite peak in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, thousands of feet above the desert floor. Over centuries, the wind, the ice, and the rain worked together to loosen it from the rock. Eventually, a summer storm washed it into a small creek, which carried it into a larger stream, and finally, into the Rio Grande. As long as the river is moving quickly, it has the energy to keep that grain of sand suspended in its current. The river acts as a conveyor belt, carrying the pulverized remains of the mountains toward the sea, one tiny grain at a time. But when the river reaches a reservoir, everything changes. The rushing water hits the still, deep pool of the lake and begins to slow down. As the velocity drops, the water loses its ability to carry its heavy load. The largest pebbles and coarse sands are the first to drop, settling near the mouth of the river. But the finer particles, the silts and the clays, drift further into the heart of the reservoir. They hang in the water for a long time, like dust motes dancing in a beam of sunlight, before they finally, gently, sink to the bottom. This process is known as sedimentation. Over decades, these layers of silt build up, forming a soft, thick carpet across the lake bed. It is a quiet accumulation, a library of the landscape's history. Each layer represents a different year, a different season of runoff. While this process is natural, it presents a challenge for the engineers who manage our water. Because the silt takes up space, the reservoir gradually loses its capacity to hold water. It is as if someone is slowly adding stones to the bottom of a cup. Eventually, there is less room for the liquid. Scientists estimate that some reservoirs can lose a significant percentage of their storage volume every century to this filling in. It is a reminder that the desert is always in motion, even when it appears perfectly still. The mountains are being dismantled and rearranged, moved from the high peaks to the deep valleys by the patient hands of the water. As you lie there, perhaps you can imagine yourself settling into your bed, much like that fine silt settles onto the lake bed. There is a weightiness to it, a sense of finally reaching a place of rest after a long journey. The movement of the day is over, and now there is only the slow, steady pull of gravity, inviting you to sink deeper into the softness of your pillows. Feel the tension leaving your limbs, drifting away like sediment in a calm pool, leaving the water above clear and still. This accumulation of earth is a testament to the incredible power of the river, a power that is not always so gentle. The same energy that carries mountains grain by grain can, during the season of the great rains, become a force that reshapes the entire valley. It is this power that led humans to build these massive structures in the first place, not just to save water for the dry times, but to provide a shield against the sudden, overwhelming strength of the water when the clouds finally break. The reservoir is a place of peace, but it is also a guardian, standing between the wild energy of the storm and the quiet life of the cities below. Imagine the sky over the high desert turning a deep, bruised purple as the afternoon heat peaks. This is the arrival of the summer monsoon, a season of sudden and dramatic transformation. The air, which was bone dry only hours ago, becomes heavy and fragrant with the scent of wet earth and creosote. Then the clouds break. In the southwest, a year's worth of rain can sometimes feel like it is falling all at once, turning dry, sandy arroyos into rushing torrents within minutes. Before the great dams were built, these flash floods were a source of constant uncertainty for the people living along the Rio Grande. A sudden surge of water could reshape the riverbanks, sweeping away crops and encroaching on the quiet streets of Albuquerque or the sun-drenched plazas of Las Cruces. But today, as you listen to the imagined pitter-patter of rain against a window pane, you can rest in the knowledge that the landscape has been prepared. The reservoirs we have discussed act as a giant, gentle hand, catching the sudden violence of the storm and holding it still. When a massive surge of rainwater enters a reservoir like Cochiti Lake, the water level rises slowly and safely. The dam absorbs the energy of the flood, transforming a chaotic wall of water into a calm, rising pool. This is the essence of flood control, the ability to take the unpredictable power of nature and pace it, slowing it down until it matches the steady pulse of the land. North of Albuquerque stands the Cochiti Dam, a silent sentinel made of the very earth it protects. It is one of the largest earth-filled dams in the United States, stretching for over 5 miles across the valley. Unlike the concrete gravity dams that look like sheer white cliffs, an earth-filled dam is a massive embankment of compacted soil, rock, and clay. It feels like a natural part of the geology, a long, low hill that happens to hold back a kingdom of water. Because it is so vast and heavy, it can withstand the incredible pressure of a flooded river without flinching. As you lie there, perhaps you can feel a sense of that same stability. Just as the dam stands firm against the rising tide, you are supported and secure. The heavy blankets over you are like the protective layers of the earth-filled dam, providing a cocoon of safety and warmth. The storms of the day, the busyness, the noise, the worries, have all been caught and contained. They are no longer rushing currents. They have become a still, quiet lake within you. The water that is held back by these great structures is never truly stagnant. Even when it appears perfectly smooth, there is a quiet energy humming beneath the surface. Engineers carefully manage the release of this water, ensuring that the river downstream remains a gentle, predictable flow. This movement is no longer a threat. It has become a resource. The same water that was once a wild flood is now a steady stream of potential, ready to be put to work in a way that is as clean and quiet as the falling snow. This transition from raw power to controlled grace is a marvel of human ingenuity, allowing us to live in harmony with the cycles of the desert. The energy of the water is still there, pulsing softly in the dark, waiting to be transformed into something even more subtle and bright. Imagine the water, held back by the massive weight of the dam, being invited into a hidden passage. This is where the potential energy of the reservoir, the silent power of millions of gallons of water resting against the concrete, is transformed into something almost magical. It is the process of turning a slow, deep flow
into a gentle glow of light that reaches far across the desert to the homes and streets of New Mexico. This is the quiet work of hydroelectric power, a method of generating energy that feels as steady and rhythmic as the breath of a sleeping giant. Deep within the structure of the dam, there are large, reinforced pipes known as penstocks. The water enters these intakes far below the surface, where it is cold, dark, and heavy. As it moves through these passages, the weight of the lake above pushes it forward with a focused, silent intention. There is no fire here, no burning coal, and no rushing steam. There is only the natural gravitational pull of the water seeking a lower path. In the heart of the powerhouse, tucked away from the sun and the wind, the water meets the blades of a turbine. The turbine is a massive, finely balanced wheel designed to capture the water's movement without a struggle. As the water flows over the blades, the turbine begins to spin. It is a slow, rhythmic rotation, a heavy and grounded movement that creates a low, soothing hum. In the stillness of the underground chamber, this vibration is a constant, steady pulse, a frequency so deep and resonant that it seems to harmonize with the earth itself. This spinning motion turns a shaft connected to a generator. Inside the generator, large magnets move past coils of copper wire, an elegant dance of physics that coaxes electrons into motion. This is the birth of electricity. It is a clean and quiet transition. A fascinating fact of engineering is that hydroelectric power is a truly renewable energy source that produces no emissions. It does not consume the water, it merely borrows its momentum. The same drop of water that spins the turbine today will eventually evaporate, fall as snow on the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and return to the river to begin the journey again. It is a closed, graceful loop, as eternal as the seasons. Once the water has performed its task, it is released from the base of the dam. It emerges into the tail race, the area of the river just downstream from the powerhouse. The water is often cooler here, having come from the deep, shaded depths of the reservoir. It bubbles softly as it returns to the open air, its energy spent, its purpose fulfilled. The turbulence of the machinery is left behind, and the water quickly regains its composure, smoothing out into a gentle, mirror-like surface. As we move away from the hum of the turbines and the hidden world of the powerhouse, we return to the surface of the lake. The industrial work of the dam is finished for now, tucked away in the shadows of the concrete. Above, the world is silent. The reservoir stretches out like a vast, dark silk sheet, undisturbed by the activity deep below. The transition from the heavy, mechanical strength of the dam to the soft, recreational peace of the water's surface is seamless. Here, the only movement is the slow lap of a tiny wave against the shore, and the only light is the soft reflection of the world above. The energy has been gathered, the light has been sent to the cities, and the water is finally free to rest under the watchful eyes of the stars. As the moon rises over the dark silhouettes of the surrounding mesas, the reservoir transforms. The deep, vibrant blue of the daytime water shifts into a liquid obsidian, polished and profoundly still. In the absence of the sun, the desert air cools rapidly, and a gentle hush falls over the landscape. The water, which worked so hard during the heat of the day to nourish the valley and turn the turbines, now rests. It becomes a vast, horizontal mirror, reflecting a sky so crowded with stars that it seems almost impossible to count them. Imagine standing on the shore of Elephant Butte or Navajo Lake at midnight, far from the glowing lights of any major city. The silence is absolute.
broken only by the occasional rhythmic lap of a tiny wave against the sand. When you look down at the water, you are not just looking at a lake, you are looking at a twin of the cosmos. Every constellation, every planet, and the long, misty ribbon of the Milky Way is duplicated on the surface with startling clarity. It is a rare and beautiful sight, a moment where the earth and the heavens seem to meet at the water's edge. There is a specific scientific reason why the stars appear so much more vivid here than in many other parts of the world. New Mexico is renowned for its dark skies, a quality protected by both geography and law. The state's high average altitude means there is less atmosphere between you and the stars. But the real secret lies in the dry desert air.
In more humid climates, the air is thick with water vapor, which acts like a hazy lens, scattering and blurring the light from distant galaxies. Here, the low humidity means the air is crisp and incredibly transparent. This lack of moisture allows the starlight to travel to your eyes and to the surface of the reservoir without being distorted. The stars don't just twinkle, they burn with a steady, sharp brilliance, casting enough light to see your own shadow on the pale canyon walls. As you sit in the coolness of the night, watching the light shimmer on the water, you might feel a deep sense of calm washing over you. This isn't just a coincidence of the scenery. There is a wealth of psychological research into what is known as blue spaces. While green spaces like forests are wonderful for the soul, being near large bodies of water has a unique effect on the human mind. The sight and sound of water are known to induce a state of blue mind, a mildly meditative state characterized by peace, unity, and a sense of general happiness. The horizontal expanse of the reservoir provides a visual break from the vertical clutter of our daily lives. It allows the eyes to rest on a far-off horizon, which signal to the brain that there are no immediate threats, allowing the nervous system to shift from a state of fight or flight into one of rest and digest. The rhythmic quality of the light dancing on the ripples and the vastness of the water remind us of the slow, steady pace of nature. In the presence of these blue spaces, our heart rates tend to slow, our breathing deepens, and the mental noise of the day begins to fade into the background. The reservoir at night is a sanctuary of stillness. It is a place where the heavy engineering of the dam and the complex physics of the river system give way to pure, quiet beauty. The water holds the light of the moon in a long, silver path that stretches across the lake, inviting the mind to wander along that glowing trail into a deeper state of relaxation. Everything is balanced. The air is cool, the water is calm, and the stars are bright. Even in this profound stillness, however, the water remains sensitive to the world around it. It is a delicate fabric, waiting for the slightest touch to set it in motion. A reminder that even the most peaceful surface is part of a dynamic, living system. Imagine for a moment that the vast, dark surface of the reservoir is a single, stretched sheet of dark silk. In the deep quiet of the New Mexican night, it is so perfectly still that the reflection of the stars looks like a second sky, trapped just beneath the water. But even in this profound silence, something small, perhaps a single bead of dew from an overhanging cottonwood branch, loses its grip and falls. It strikes the surface with a tiny, musical sound, and in that instant, the physics of the ripple begins. What you are seeing isn't actually the water moving from the center outward toward the distant shore. Instead, you are watching energy travel.
The water molecules themselves mostly stay where they are, bobbing gently up and down in place, while the pulse of energy from that one drop pushes through them. It is a beautiful, efficient transfer of momentum. The initial impact creates a small depression in the surface, and the water's natural buoyancy pushes it back up, overshooting the level surface and creating a crest. This rhythmic rising and falling radiates outward in those iconic concentric circles we know so well. They are perfect geometric rings that grow larger and larger, their edges softening and their height diminishing as the energy is gradually shared across more and more of the lake's surface. This elegant movement is made possible by a remarkable property of water called surface tension. At the very surface, where the water meets the cool, dry desert air, the water molecules are more attracted to each other than they are to the air above. They pull together tightly, creating a sort of invisible, elastic skin. If you were to look very closely at the edge of a ripple, you would see this skin stretching and bending without breaking. It is this same tension that allows a drop of water to form a perfect bead, and why the surface of the reservoir can support the weight of a tiny water strider, its feet making small, velvet-like indentations in the water without sinking. This surface tension acts like a thin, flexible membrane, allowing the ripple to hold its shape as it glides across the water, a shimmering messenger of a single, small event. As the ripple eventually reaches the shore and dissolves into the damp sand, the reservoir returns to its mirror-like state. This ability to absorb a disturbance and return to a state of calm is a form of liquid resilience. The desert surrounding the water shares this quality. It is a landscape defined by its ability to endure, to take the sudden energy of a summer monsoon or the weight of a long, parched winter and remain fundamentally unchanged. The earth here is patient. It knows how to wait for the things it needs. Like the surface of the lake, the high plateau has a way of smoothing out the rough edges of time, absorbing the cycles of the world with a quiet, steady strength that has lasted for millions of years. This resilience is not just a physical trait. It is the very character of the high desert. The plants, the animals, and the ancient rocks themselves have all evolved to handle the ebb and flow of resources. They understand that stillness is not the absence of life, but a preparation for what comes next. As you lie there, perhaps imagining those soft circular waves moving further and further away until they vanish, you can feel that same sense of resilience within yourself. Like the desert, you can absorb the events of the day, let the ripples of thought move through you, and eventually find your way back to a place of perfect, undisturbed quiet. The land is waiting for the next turn of the cycle, just as the water waits for the sun to rise, and just as your mind waits for the soft, restorative embrace of sleep. In the high desert, waiting is not merely a pause in activity. It is a fundamental way of being. The landscape itself is an expert in the art of the long wait, possessing a patient wisdom that we are only beginning to understand. When the clouds are high and thin, and the monsoon rains feel like a distant memory, the land does not panic. It simply settles deeper into itself, slowing its heart rate and drawing its resources inward. This period of waiting, which we often call a drought, is a natural part of the rhythmic pulse of the Southwest. It is a time of quiet endurance, a long, slow breath held by the earth until the atmosphere shifts once more. These shifts are often dictated by forces thousands of miles away in the vast, dark expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Here, the cycles of El Niño and La Niña act as a global heartbeat, influencing the path of the winds and the destination of the clouds. During an El Niño year, the surface waters of the central and eastern Pacific become unusually warm. This warmth acts like a gentle nudge to the jet stream, often steering a parade of moisture-rich storms across the southern United States and into the heart of New Mexico. It is a season of abundance, where the reservoirs fill and the arroyos sing with the sound of rushing water. But eventually the cycle turns, and La Niña may arrive, characterized by cooler ocean temperatures that push the storm tracks further north, leaving the high plateau in a state of dry, sunny contemplation. These cycles are part of a grand celestial balance, a cosmic seesaw that the land has navigated for millennia. The life that calls this desert home has developed extraordinary ways to mirror this patience. Plants here do not fight the dryness. They adapt to it with a grace that is almost silent. Some, like the resilient creosote bush, have roots that spread wide and shallow to catch the very first hint of a sprinkle, while also diving deep to find the last lingering molecules of moisture in the soil. Other species have mastered the science of dormancy to an incredible degree. It is a fascinating fact of desert biology that certain plants and seeds can remain completely dormant for years, or even decades, during a prolonged dry spell. They exist in a state of suspended animation, their metabolic processes slowed to a near halt, waiting in the dust for the specific chemical signal that only a significant rain can provide. When that rain finally arrives, they awaken with a sudden, vibrant energy, blooming and seeding in a matter of days before returning to their long sleep. This ability to go quiet, to conserve energy, and to wait for the right moment is a testament to the resilience of the natural world. It reminds us that there is a time for growth and a time for rest, and that neither is more important than the other. Just as the desert plants tuck themselves away to survive the heat, you too can allow your mind to retreat from the demands of the waking world. You can find comfort in the knowledge that the earth knows how to sustain itself through the lean times, and that the water held in the great reservoirs is a bridge between the seasons of plenty. Because the land is so careful with its resources, there is a deep cultural respect for every drop that flows through the canyons and valleys. This shared understanding that water is life leads us to a collective sense of stewardship, a quiet promise to protect the silver thread that keeps the desert alive. As we think of the water resting behind the dams, waiting to be used, we begin to see how every small action we take to preserve it contributes to the enduring beauty of this high, sun-drenched world. This shared sense of stewardship transforms the way we live within the landscape, turning the act of conservation into a quiet, daily ritual. In the high desert, where the sun is a constant companion and the clouds are often just passing travelers, the inhabitants have learned that every drop of water is a precious gift. It is a collective effort, a silent agreement between millions of people to treat the resource with the reverence it deserves. When you turn off a faucet or choose to plant a garden that thrives on the natural rainfall, you are participating in a grand statewide symphony of preservation. It is a mindful way of existing, a recognition that our lives are inextricably linked to the health of the Rio Grande and the levels of the reservoirs we have discussed. This respect for water is visible in the very fabric of the neighborhoods.
If you were to walk through a New Mexican town at twilight, you would see the beauty of xeriscaping. The word comes from the Greek xeros, meaning dry, and it describes a method of landscaping that embraces the natural environment rather than trying to force a different climate upon it. Instead of thirsty, emerald-green lawns that require constant attention, these gardens are filled with the silver gray of Russian sage, the deep greens of agave and yucca, and the vibrant purples of desert willow. These plants are built for this world. They require very little supplemental water, and they provide a habitat for the local pollinators that hum through the evening air. There is a profound sense of peace in a xeriscaped garden. The crunch of gravel underfoot, the scent of lavender and creosote, and the sight of a hummingbird darting between trumpet-shaped flowers all remind us that a dry garden is not a barren one. It is full of life, perfectly tuned to the rhythm of the high plateau. This shift in how we view our outdoor spaces is one of the primary reasons why water conservation has been so successful. One of the most encouraging facts in modern New Mexican science is that despite a growing population, many cities have seen their total water usage remain steady or even decrease over the last few decades. In Albuquerque, for example, the per capita water use has dropped by nearly 50% since the mid-1990s. This achievement is the result of thousands of small individual choices, installing low-flow shower heads, using high-efficiency washing machines, and replacing old plumbing with modern fixtures designed to move water with precision and care. These engineering marvels inside our homes are the micro versions of the massive dams and spillways that hold the rivers back. They are the final gatekeepers of the water's journey from the snow-capped peaks to the kitchen sink. When we use these tools mindfully, we are honoring the long path that every gallon has traveled. We are acknowledging the work of the engineers at Elephant Butte, the ancient wisdom of the mayordomos on the acequias, and the patient movement of water through the deep, dark aquifers beneath our feet. As you settle deeper into your rest, you can take comfort in this success. The story of water in the desert is often told as one of scarcity and struggle, but it is equally a story of innovation and harmony. It shows us that when we align our needs with the realities of the land, we can create a sustainable path forward. The reservoirs serve as our safety net, but our shared commitment to conservation is what ensures that the net remains strong. We are looking toward a future where science and tradition walk hand in hand, finding new ways to stretch every gallon and protect the silver thread for the generations that will follow us. The air is cool now, and the desert is hushed, resting in the knowledge that its people are watching over its most vital treasure. Every drop is counted, every gallon is respected, and the balance of the high plateau remains steady as we look toward the horizon of a new day. The story of the Rio Grande is far from over. It is a living narrative, a long-form poem written in the language of silt and current, being composed even now as the night deepens. For centuries, the people of the high desert looked to the horizon and the mountain peaks, reading the clouds and the wind for signs of what the coming season might bring. Today, that ancient watch continues, but it is now supported by a silent, orbiting choir of technology. We are entering a new era of stewardship, where the future of the river is being shaped by a profound marriage of traditional wisdom and cutting-edge science. This transition provides a sense of quiet security, knowing that the silver thread is being monitored with a level of care and precision that was once unimaginable. In the past,
Understanding the river's future meant physical expeditions into the deep snow of the high country, where hydrologists would manually measure the depth of the winter pack. While those boots-on-the-ground measurements still happen, they are now part of a much larger, more intricate picture provided by the view from space.
One of the most remarkable advancements in modern water science is the use of satellite data to measure snowpack from orbit. Specialized instruments, such as those on NASA's Terra and Aqua satellites, can track the extent of snow cover across the entire Rocky Mountain range in real time. Even more impressively, scientists use airborne snow observatories and satellite-based radar to calculate the snow water equivalent. This allows engineers to know with startling accuracy exactly how many billions of gallons of water are held in the frozen reservoirs of the peaks before the first spring thaw even begins. This data flows from the vacuum of space down to the computers of water managers in Albuquerque and Las Cruces, allowing them to predict the river's behavior months in advance. It is a form of foresight that allows for a much gentler management of the land.
When we can see the volume of the coming runoff, we can prepare our man-made reservoirs like Elephant Butte and Cochiti with a steady hand. We can release water slowly to create space for the surge, protecting downstream communities from the sudden power of a flood, while ensuring that every possible drop is captured and stored for the dry summer months. This scientific vigilance acts as a silent guardian, a way of smoothing out the extremes of the desert's natural cycles. As you lie there, feeling the stillness of the room around you, you might find it comforting to imagine these satellites drifting silently over the dark curve of the Earth. They are watching over the San Juan Mountains, the Rio Grande Rift, and the quiet expanses of the Chihuahuan Desert while you rest. They are part of a global effort to understand our planet's pulse, helping us adapt to a changing climate with intelligence and grace. The future of the Rio Grande is not a mystery to be feared, but a path to be walked with clarity. We are learning how to be better neighbors to the river, using data to ensure that the needs of the farms, the cities, and the delicate ecosystems of the bosque are all met in a sustainable balance. The science of the future is not just about control. It is about harmony. It is about using our tools to listen more closely to what the land is telling us. It is the sound of a computer model calculating the optimal flow for a spawning fish, and the sight of a satellite map helping a farmer decide exactly when to open his head gate. This constant, quiet flow of information is what keeps the desert green and the river flowing. It is a testament to our commitment to this landscape, a promise that the silver thread will continue to weave its way through the red rocks and golden mesas for generations to come. The air outside is cool and thin, and the stars are brilliant in their clarity. The river is in good hands, watched over by the eyes of science and the hearts of those who call this high plateau home. You can let go of the day's concerns, knowing that the rhythm of the water is being kept with steady, thoughtful care. The desert is at peace, the reservoirs are holding their treasure, and the future is unfolding one gentle drop at a time. And so, as we reach the end of our journey through the high desert, I invite you to take one final deep breath. Let the air fill your lungs slowly, and as you exhale, feel any remaining tension in your body dissolve into the softness of your bed. We have traveled a long way together tonight, following the path of the water through a land of extremes. We began in the high, cold peaks of the San Juan Mountains, where the snow sits in silent drifts, waiting for the spring sun to turn it into a silver thread. We followed that thread as it grew into the Rio Grande, carving its way through the volcanic rift and the ancient mesas. We stood on the massive concrete shoulders of Elephant Butte, feeling the immense weight of the water held in reserve, a silent savings account for the dry years ahead. We wandered the winding banks of the Pecos and felt the cool shade of the bosque, where the cottonwoods whisper in the breeze. We have seen how humans and nature work in a delicate dance, the ancient wisdom of the acequias blending with the modern precision of satellite data. Every drop of water we discussed is part of a grand, eternal cycle, moving from the clouds to the earth, through the sand and the stone, and eventually back into the air. It is a system that is both vast and incredibly intimate, touching every blade of grass and every living creature in this dry, beautiful land. The science of the reservoir is, at its heart, a science of care, a way of ensuring that life can thrive even when the rains are slow to come. The water in the reservoirs is still now. The surface of Elephant Butte is like a dark mirror, reflecting the constellations that wheel slowly overhead. The ripples have smoothed out, and the deep pressures at the bottom of the dams are steady and calm. The desert around you is sleeping. The coyotes have quieted, the sandhill cranes are tucked away in the wetlands, and the heat of the day has been replaced by the crisp, restorative chill of the New Mexican night. You are safe, you are warm, and you are exactly where you need to be. You are part of this stillness, like a leaf drifting on the surface of a slow-moving river. You don't need to struggle or direct your path. You can simply let the current carry you toward the horizon of sleep. Everything is taken care of. The reservoirs are holding their treasure. The aquifers are recharging in the dark earth. And the river will continue its journey long after you have drifted off. Feel the weight of your limbs, the warmth of your blankets, and the quiet, steady rhythm of your heart. There is nothing left to do and nothing left to learn tonight. The story of the water is complete, and your rest is the most natural thing in the world. As the stars watch over the high plateau, let yourself drift downstream, toward the quiet, toward the dark, toward the peace of the river's end. Sleep now. Sleep.